Thanks, guys, for joining today. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to kick this off with Cybersights, which is going to be a regularly occurring webinar series. Councilmember John Lee, thank you so much for joining today. I'm really excited to learn from you as well. Dr. Akshay Pottathil, of course, thank you for your time, and Ms. Shobha Mallarapu, thank you so much as well. Um, so I'm going to start off just a little bit talking about the relevancy of why this webinar exists, and also why we think it's a worthy cause for a valuable use of people's time. As we know, cyber threats are becoming an increasing problem in today's society. It's hitting all sectors full on in full force. Just in the last year, some of the things that have happened, there was a Bybit hack that cost about $1.46 billion in digital assets. Grubhub itself saw a massive data leak affecting millions of customers, drivers, and merchants all in one go. And then, of course, DISA Global Solutions. That data breach exposed about 3.3 million healthcare records. This is an ongoing problem, and those are just three examples, quick examples of things that have happened in the last year. Before we jump straight into the questions, I wanted to really introduce everyone, each one of our panelists, to the people on the call. That way, everyone becomes more familiar with the expertise that we have. So, for just a few minutes here, I'm going to speak about Councilmember John Lee. Councilmember John Lee has represented the Los Angeles 12th District since August of 2019. He brings a pragmatic, results-oriented approach to City Hall. His leadership centers on public safety, economic development, and delivering core city services to the San Fernando Valley. John currently serves as chair of the Public Works Committee, vice chair of the Public Safety Committee, vice chair of the Neighborhoods and Community Enrichment Committee, and vice chair of the Planning and Land Use Management Committee. He's also a member of the Housing and Homelessness Committee. And he's a lifelong resident of the district, and John is committed to ensuring that the voices of his constituents are heard and prioritized in policymaking. So, Councilmember John Lee, thank you so much again for joining.
Of course, thanks for having me here, Craig.
Absolutely, absolutely. And next we have Miss Shobha Mallarapu. So Shobha is the president and CEO of Envia Solutions. It's a cybersecurity and information assurance consulting firm established in 2007. Her team has been directly responsible for protecting over 500 million records across sectors such as government, healthcare, and finance. Under her leadership, Envia has become a trusted partner for multi-billion-dollar enterprises, offering services like risk assessments, penetration testing, and compliances with standards like HIPAA and NIST or NIST. Shobha currently holds 6 U.S. patents in circuit design and security engineering, with additional patents pending. Her contributions to the field have been recognized with accolades such as the 2024 Outstanding CEO Award by the Sacramento Business Journal, Women Entrepreneur of the Year, Woman Innovator of the Year, and the SBA Business of the Year. So, Shobha, thank you so much for your time and your expertise.
Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. And last but certainly not least, we have Dr. Akshay Pottathil. So Dr. Akshay is a data scientist and edupreneur, or education entrepreneur, and strategist with extensive experience building bridges between the public and private sectors through innovation, analytics, and purposeful storytelling. So for over 2 decades, he has worked across North America, Europe, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia, helping governments and organizations navigate complexity, align culture with strategy, and make better decisions through behavior analysis and data-informed architecture. So, Dr. Akshay, thank you so much as well for joining and sharing your expertise with all of us today.
Thank you for that, Craig.
We've got some questions prepared for you guys that, I think everyone on the call would just love to hear your thoughts on, and how we can better strategize together as we, navigate the world of cyber threats and security threats as it stands. So I'm just going to open the floor to maybe we start with Councilmember John Lee here with the first about what emerging or escalating threats should every leader be watching in 2025 that might not be so obvious yet?
Yeah, you know what? Deep fakes have matured so much, and now with the real-time synthetic voice and video manipulation, attackers are using them in new and old ways. They're using them during phishing attacks to fool some of our employees into providing unauthorized access or confidential information. For me, a big worry right now is thinking about how many things touch the city of Los Angeles with our employees. With over 30,000 employees, everyone has a phone. Everyone, a lot of people have laptops, and when that connects to our, mainframe of the city of Los Angeles, you know, are we aware of every single device out there that has the possibility of affecting the city of LA? So those are some things that sort of keep me up at night.
Shobha, do you have any thoughts to share on this topic?
Yes, so I want to touch upon what Councilmember Lee mentioned about the shadow IT, we call it. So whenever we do assessments, that's one of the tasks that we undertake to find all the shadow devices that are not supposed to be connected to the network. So that's definitely a threat. And the deepfake, I also agree with you, Councilmember Lee. And another one with the abuse of AI, which also leads to the deep fake, and supply chain risk is going to be a continuing threat, which could go up to third, fourth, fifth tier of supply chain to get to the prime and then to the client. So that those are and these could be either state sponsored or hacktivists or for financial gain. So there could be many motivation factors behind these. But and another one I want to touch upon is the privacy. So with the digital surveillance, there is a threat to privacy of the citizens. Though surveillance is a threat, there needs to be a balance that where there is a need to be logging and monitoring as required, but anonymity to protect privacy is a factor there that needs to be considered.
Dr. Akshay, do you have anything you'd like to share on this topic as well?
Well, I promise I'm not an AI deepfake, for starters. So one of both of them had a similar angle in this, and it is about treating behavioral pattern as critical security infrastructure, right? That is what deepfakes and all of this comes down to. And what the premise of this is what's keeping you up at night. Well, those are known threats. I am really worried about what's happening while you sleep. So while John goes to sleep and what is happening in the world that they wake up to, that is the proactive threat mitigation zone that worries me.
Sure. And, when I get notifications of foreign governments trying to, I get a cybersecurity update, and I hear that. I mean, those are things you think of, you hear on TV, different things like that. Well, that's actively happening even at the city of Los Angeles. So those are happening probably while I'm sleeping too.
No, that's a great point. I think actually that's a good segue into the second question for you guys here. And specifically just when you mentioned some of the similarities in your answers, the deep fake, shadow IT, treating the unknown threats as important as the known threats. What do you see in terms of the changes in the last 12 months that need immediate attention? And then how can people take immediate attention or action to help mitigate these threats?
Who's that? Anybody jump in, Craig, or?
Please, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Councilman.
Okay. Well, I mean, from a municipal perspective, Shobha talked about this. For us, I mean, the supply chain attacks are moving downstream, and attackers are targeting smaller vendors and open source dependencies. And the city, unless we continue to invest in cybersecurity, is open to attack through those vulnerabilities in our outside vendors. But also the things that, when you talk about immediate attention, it's something that is true now. It was true yesterday. It's true a year ago. Human error still remains one of the biggest threats to our organizational security, and cyber criminals know exactly how to exploit it. Now, we think we've become better at trying to, recognize some of these phishing attacks. But one just happened here in the office, and it just happened to be sent from the chief of staff, asking the staff to buy gift cards, and they get something from their chief of staff, and they are like, okay, what do you need? How can we get it? I mean, it's with AI, I just had the feeling that it's going to become more tailored to every single, messaging and, person. And so while, yeah, there's all these other things looming, I mean, that human error and making sure that we are, working with our employees to really, if you at any chance think that this is a possibility, then you should reach out to ITA and let them know about it.
I agree. Even with me being in the security field, I get fooled sometimes, and I have to send it to the team and say, "Hey, can I open this? Is this really true or not?" So it has happened to me many times. And with AI, the exploits are being commoditized. So anyone without any security expertise can buy these tools and exploit vulnerabilities out there. So it's understanding what threats and vulnerabilities and risks are out there and addressing them in a timely fashion, in addition to the training. So that's why NY also does threat modeling as part of the risk assessments and make recommendations to mitigate these risks. So in addition to doing with the risk assessments, proactively identifying risks would be one of the pathways to reduce risk to the organizations, in addition to training employees.
Well, that's a very interesting connection. So let's take a public entity, or even a city for that matter, teams up with somebody such as Anvaya and to roll audits and compliance. It's not about just auditing your vendor. It's about auditing the vendor's vendor. The fourth party visibility is key. So ransomware as a service has a drag and drop user interface system powered by AI tagging. This is what gets a chief of staff email for employees to buy gift cards. And if you want to impress somebody, you end up going and getting something like that through a Cash App, and it's gone, right? It happens more often than not. That's why it happens. They're casting a wide net. And it doesn't matter, only a fraction of the people of a percentage needs to reply to this for it to be a billion-dollar industry. So threats are commoditized, and they're faster than ever. So the response time is very different. So especially imagine when that happens when you're busy, when you're sleeping. It's that time. I mean, human beings are not able to stand guard 24/7 watching for a phishing attack, right? So they slip through the cracks. This is why a lot of the systems that we're seeing needs to be applied. This is why we integrate it. This is why we train. It's a combined effort and all hazard approach to different type of cyber attacks.
Absolutely. I mean, even from a personal experience, something that happened recently was it seemed to be from a legitimate law office, actually in California, and talked about cease and desist and how you're using IP, or you're using proprietary wording on your website, and you need to stop now. And here's this link, and it plays into essentially like fear mongering, right? Like you see something like that, and you immediately want to click because you're like, I have to solve this right now. And you just have to take that second to breathe and realize it's probably not legitimate. It shouldn't be clicked on, right? And turns out that definitely was the case in that one.
I got an email telling me that my popularity was going down. And first thing I was like, whoa, wait a second, what's going on here? Play to my ego. And then of course, I was like, wait a second, okay. But it definitely caught my attention. And I sent that on to ITA, and it was a phishing thing. But still, I mean, it somehow tailor-made it for maybe millions of people got that same messaging, but it definitely they know how to grab you.
Now all the Cyber Insight audience members knows how to get your attention, what to
No, I mean, I think that brings up a great point about the that hyperlocal, if you will, or just the tailoring of these phishing attacks. And it does bring into the next question, specifically talking about team strategies. So if there's anything that you're doing to help prevent serious breaches, if you've had to recover from one that you can speak about, for example, what you did, and then how you can help others on the call learn from that as well. So I'll pass it on to you, Councilmember Lee.
So say the question again.
Absolutely. So essentially, sharing a moment where your team strategy helped prevent a serious breach, or perhaps even if you can talk about it, if you recovered from one, and then what you learned in the process.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, this is probably a better question for the general manager of ITA. You know, I find out on the back end of, you know, different security breaches. It's my job as a legislator to make sure that we are constantly looking at new technology, constantly trying to see what's out there. But you know, I do rely on my own ITA whole department to sort of you know, I know some of the things that we've implemented have worked, because when I get those cybersecurity threats and they say, hey, they got past level 1, 2, 3, but level 4, stop them. You know, those are things that you know, provide obviously a little bit of relief at the time, and then you then move on to, okay, what do we do next? How do we strengthen, you know, the areas of 1, 2, 3? They shouldn't get to 4, and so that's some of the things that I sort of deal with on my level.
Absolutely.
Yeah, defense in depth is an important factor. That's why once they go through multiple levels, and they may then get tired and go after someone who only has 1 or 2 levels. So always be stronger than the next person. So if they go after them, they're easier target than you. But I do want to share most recent one that comes to my mind, which actually happened this week. A customer called in for help in doing a quick analysis of a particular application that was affecting a critical function in a very large geographic area. So our team of experts jumped in and reviewed the application, analyzed what was happening, and then provided recommendations. So some of them contained some compensating controls that would immediately stop the threat, and then just to buy time, and then some long-term controls that require re-architecting the software. So this is where I want to bring in the next point, where we have assessed hundreds of applications, large applications, and we're talking serving thousands, millions of users. And there have been instances where the entire application had to go back to the drawing board because the architecture was not secure. So and it wasted 1 or 2 years of development time and a couple of millions of dollars. So we always recommend engaging companies like Anvaya or someone equivalent throughout the life cycle from design to deployment. So we're part of the team guiding them in security, so they are secure from day one, and not finding out too late, like how our customer happened to find out. So it'll save them money upfront.
You know, Craig, I think it's the team wins, right? So it's all breach prevention is about training. You have to train like it's real. You should not train as it is a demo. And it's about building muscle memory, and both at an organization level and at a response level. And that is what equals money saved, right? When it comes to financial crimes that happens over the network. But there are other laws to a cyber attack, right? So critical infrastructure has a much more larger width of problems that could take place from it. So we have to understand, and we have to prioritize all attacks equally. Because if there's a vulnerability, it is unlike a problem that would happen with you as a human being. You could say if it's a cardiological issue, we rate it at this. If it's just, but in a cyber attack, a system that's open could have a domino effect. So it's really important to look at these things and not say, we should not be asking folks, well, prove what you can do for us. We should be working with them to see how strong we can make our system. That attitude mindset change is what is required in the age of AI, right? And that's where we as a society, we're used to saying, well, prove it to us it works. No, no, no. We must prove that it doesn't work because the other side literally only have to get it right one time. And we have to get it right 100% of the time. That's a big challenge.
Absolutely. Absolutely. These are fantastic points being brought up and actually blends directly into the next topic of discussion. And it's more about investment. So considering all the things that we have talked about, whether it's the threats, the things that keep us up at night, some of the actionable items that have happened in recent months, what would you say the best thing to invest would be? So whether that's like tech, talent, process, what would you say and why?
Yes, I'm assuming it's one.
We can start with anyone that wants to jump in.
Akshay, do you want to jump in? Then I'll go next.
I would invest in talent that understands the process and technology. Right, this is the most important thing. It's very hard for me. I'm an academic at the end of the day, so the programs we design, the students we design, and even in my consulting side of the house, it's about making people understand technology and helping them to practice so they can use those technology, not just in good times, but in times of crises, right? So you train for certainty and you prepare for uncertainty. This is my mission when approaching this particular domain or any type of a emergency management or crisis domain.
Yeah, so I want to add to that. So we call it PPT, Triad People Process Technology, and we often evaluate our clients for all three. First thing is to understand why and how, and then determine the technology that's required and the skill sets that's needed to support the technology as well. So they both go hand in hand, and of course, having processes equally important to actually implement that process to by the people and use it in conjunction with the technology. So the talent could come from in-house or consultants. So if we go help, we definitely do a knowledge transfer and training and train the clients' employees before we leave. But definitely talent is short these days. Experienced talent, I should say. There is talent, but the experienced talent is extremely critical. That's where consultants like Anvaya come in.
Yeah, and for me at the City of Los Angeles, I mean, it's kind of a combination of all of them, but it's really, for me right now, talent of just understanding. I don't know what I don't know. That's out there. That's constantly changing. I'm not a cybersecurity expert, right? I rely on the experts to give this information to me, and almost every single time throughout my entire time in office, when I've met with some cybersecurity company and we're talking about different security systems, I learned something new. I learned, oh, well, guess what? Now they're doing it this way. And, now things that I haven't even imagined. And so really for me, it's making sure that we have that expertise, knowing what is on that cutting edge of technology that we need to make sure that our information is secure.
Yeah, that's true.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that rounds us out into the first half of our discussion here. I just wanted to say a quick reminder to everyone that's on today. There is a Q&A function, so if there's anything that you want to go further into depth about, please feel free to drop a question in the Q&A section for us, and we'll ask those questions at the end. But I just wanted to give give a shout out to the Q&A section. So you'll notice the chat feature is disabled for most everyone on the call, but that Q&A functionality does exist. And feel free to ask any questions about anything that you've heard or new topics that you want to hear about. We'll definitely get to them in the end. So yeah, I think this question is we'll pass it to Councilmember Lee here first. But it's more this question is dealing with how local governments can better collaborate with better private sector partners to strengthen cybersecurity across public infrastructure and community services. So, what are some of the wins that you've seen recently with a public-private collaboration, and how can the public sector and the private sector work hand in hand together to help alleviate some of these threats?
Yeah, I mean, we've actually talked about this in trying to, within our district and within the city of Los Angeles, is establishing, like local cybersecurity like alliances. So when things happen that we are sharing, that we have established partnerships, that we are sharing that information. It's not just with other like, private industries. For me, as the city of Los Angeles, I have 87 other cities that make up the Los Angeles County. I work with them on whether through independent cities or contract cities. I have relationships with them. I don't necessarily know if we are sharing that information as it happens so that they can better be prepared for those things. So I think it works both ways. I think that when we learn about something, we should have a network established, whether it would be in the district to have cybersecurity alliance amongst the companies that are located here, or whether it's in the city, but also those partnerships with the other city is something that I think that we need to take that next step, because like we said, we all seem connected, right? And if one of them gets hit, does that leave us vulnerable, to the same things that they got hit on? And sharing that information, I think, would be very, very helpful.
Yeah, I would like to add where understanding the security posture of an organization is important, because then you can identify the gaps and then take action on bridging the gaps. So it should be treated as an investment. The cost of not investing would be high. So cybersecurity assessment is no longer a luxury. It's actually required. So using something like a risk management platform that Anwaya has developed that could be easily be used to assess the maturity of the organization and also keep track of the progress. So the city knows the progress that it's making towards enhancing the security posture, and monitoring it periodically, monitoring the key metrics to know where they stand and can actually be accountable to the citizens. For example, for city governments would be an important element in order that would allow private sector partners to help the public infrastructure.
At the end of the day, you have to set up shared cyber ranges, right? Digital fire drills all day long, because paperwork doesn't build trust. Trading together does that. So a lot of times with the government, we see a trail of paperwork that says, this is the plan, none of that really helps in the long term unless you train on that. And that's the first lesson. And then there's a whole notion of like claiming working with these folks, we are now considering ourselves a smart city. There's no metrics to measure smart, right? Even when you call somebody smart, what does that mean, right? It doesn't mean anything. So resilient city is what you want to try to get to, which is more prepared. So a lot of times we get caught up in the buzzwords and things that are in, and not really try to understand, is there a metrics that you can measure this with? If there's no measurement, then there's no accountability. And it's as simple as that. right? You hire somebody and you say, you're in charge of making our city smart. 5 months later, they come back and says, oh, well, good news, the city is smart. Well, and now the question is, how smart are you to approve that? This is what it really fundamentally comes down to, right? So and there's every time you go to conference, people come back with all these terms to report that they were actually there 40% of the time, right? So this is part of the problem. So a lot of it is saying, okay, what is the accountability to this? If you're in charge of this, what have you done? And also liability. I mean, when you get these breaches, the difference is, what is the liability issue here? Have you done anything to be proactive in this nature? Or were you just sitting there and says, well, if it happens, it happens, or we've met these codes. But that's what it is. So the bigger the city, the more people that are using technology in the city, it is accountability and responsibility shared, not just in the all the way from the citizens to the top of the city.
Yeah, and Craig, you mentioned like what are some of the things that maybe have been sort of, for lack of a better term, wins in this area, these partnerships that we have. And I'm not a cybersecurity expert, but I think I remember what it was called. It was, when you plug in a USB into, let's say you're at the airport or at Starbucks, I think it was called juice jacking, that, everyone, I know that I do. If I'm at the airport and I see a USB thing, I don't even think twice. I plug it in and I plug it into my computer. And later in hearing this, we did identify threats throughout the city. And then it's my job to then share that information, because how many people do just walk in to any establishment and trust anything that they plug their computers in? So that's, so it's not necessarily a win, but it was something that we learned through our partnership. We were able to help other small businesses and our community understand the threats that are out there, even at that level of sticking a plug into somewhere and it possibly gaining access to get information from you.
Absolutely. I think one thing in particular, we actually have a couple of questions here. I'll save one for the end, but this one I think is relevant to what we're speaking about right now, in terms of smart cities. And I think that when you talk about whether it's the juice jacking concept or anything else, when you speak about creating a smart city, more interconnectedness of individuals, you have to consider these aspects too, right? The fact that then it becomes that much easier to gain direct access to whether it's your constituents' devices, or even maybe public officials that join a public network. So I think from a standpoint of public infrastructure, what do you see as like the biggest challenge in terms of creating a smart city? Are you guys having these conversations?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the challenges are exactly what we are talking about. I mean, our digital, services, whether they be traffic lights, 911 dispatch, water treatment plants, online permitting. I mean, there's so many different things that we are trying to do to try to make it easier for our constituents to have access to government, or to, things that we are using to better use, for example, the flow of traffic. Those are all things that we are, possibly doing now, trying to become, quote unquote, a smarter city.
Absolutely.
But where does that then, with everything we're talking about, sort of play into that? And where does those vulnerabilities of the more we're doing, the more that we have opportunity to get hit? And so that's something that we're trying to balance.
So, Craig, just real quick. So, what he's describing is a connected platform, right? And from the research and development side of the house, they're called self-aware cities, right? And so it's because any current technology and the future technology coming in, it is too fast for humans to compute and analyze it. It's the new generations of connections is between machine to machine. So this is going to end up being self-aware. You want them, so that is where the unbiased come in terms of where do you sit in that module to see, okay, are these self-aware things all safe? Right. And so there's a little bit of a thing between connected cities and the next leap, which is the current technology in development, which is all based on machine-to-machine communication.
Absolutely. And then, Shobha, would you like to share anything that you've seen from your clients and when they're trying to adopt a concept of smart cities, some of the threats that you might have seen in your day-to-day dealing with being in the private sector and providing a specific cybersecurity service to them?
Yeah, understanding the overall security posture of the organization is critical. Without understanding that, no one can address what the gaps are. So taking that approach in everything that is new, that's implemented within the city, is critical in this case. So what I talked earlier about being involved from the design phase to deployment. So some of our clients have started doing that, and some are doing periodic assessments for whatever they're deploying instead of us being there constantly as their partner. And some do it annually. So there are several approaches that many different organizations are taking. So when cities become more and more smart, I would say, with all the new technology, and I think also keeping on top of all the vulnerabilities that emerge as a result of those new implementations should be a high priority as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, I would like to round out the questions here, specifically about strategy. We've talked a little bit about strategy, but I wanted to do more of a deep dive. So, maybe Shobha, we go to you first with this. In your experience, have you seen, and you don't have to name any names or anything like that, but have you seen a particular case where the right strategy made all of the difference with that client?
Yes, so I want to bring up a particular client, of course, not naming names, but it's a huge application that would affect maybe 30 million customers. And so they have involved us as their partner, like for 5 years, which really helps them have a security partner that can keep an eye on the vulnerabilities as they're developing this application. And when it is released, they can be fairly certain that it's secure then, instead of trying to get it out the door and have us involved just before the deployment, which has happened before, and it had its consequences. So I think this time around it's going to be a lot different. And so that's a very strategic move by the client to make this happen.
Perfect. And then Dr. Akshay, in your experience on the education side, have you dealt with any partners where they've implemented a certain strategy that made the difference in their organization?
Everybody has a strategy, even though everybody who got breached has a strategy, right? It's not that. It's a contact sport. You have to train for impact, right? Every large scale organization that you had, they all had a cybersecurity plan. So having a plan is not what is going to keep you safe. And I've worked on all sides, both in the private sector side and worked on contracts with the government side. Writing plans is what, especially academics, we're great at writing plans up, right? But it's about training. It all comes down to training and the person in charge of making that decision, and access control. This is one of the major issues. I mean, if people don't earlier, there was a reference to employees being an impact on this. Well, access control. As we find out, those people who retired, those people who've left, are they still having access? Are there people able to plug in USB? Simple things that most of us find like what? The what approach we should eliminate. That's what I tell people. If there is a moment that you can look at your organization and you'd be like, no, no way. Well, there is a way. It's happening right now. So looking at it from that lens, we can catch a lot of major issues, right? And so that's from my part. So
Yeah, if I may add to what Akshay said, so like identifying and authenticating and authorizing a user based on the role that they play within an application or infrastructure that they can get in, whether it's Wi-Fi or anything. So that's a very critical element of keeping the bad guys out. So having all those correctly implemented would really help unauthorized access down the road.
Absolutely. And it's funny that you mentioned bad guys because one of one of our questions here bring us into a portion of our Q&A. So it's actually about keeping out the bad guys, but more specifically, it's so as referenced by Councilmember Lee, from a cybersecurity perspective, how does the cybersecurity industry stay ahead of the bad guys that's trying to steal critical data and making ransom demands? So anyone that wants to answer on that, what are some of the things that you're working toward to keep out the bad guys?
are you asking anyone?
Anyone, yeah, please feel free.
Focus on behavior and pattern. Be proactive, not reactive, right? And curb ego. It's the enemy of any type of adaptation that we're going to be using. And use real example when you're piloting stories, right? Go and learn from what is happening within the city and try to train for it. If something happened in another city, that collaboration, shared platform really helps, right? And then have when you're thinking about a strategic plan, make sure that strategy is operational, right? So bring some operational people on there. So you can't take technology and throw it at a wall and see what sticks, right? This is the big issue. So oftentimes it's about getting everybody who are the right stakeholders together and saying, hey, does this work during a time of crisis? Not during that tabletop exercise, but when all your resources are stretched thin, are you able to operate this? And that is the plan you need to implement, not the one that when everybody has plenty of time or on a conference for the and you're getting paid to be there and you're relaxing. That's not the time to come up with this plan. It's when everything is stretched. You lost three of your best people that should be out running this. How do you run? That is what we need to do, from my opinion.
Proactive, that's what Anwar is all about. So we're always preaching proactive threat mitigation. So having risk assessments done proactively instead of waiting to throw money at it once a breach happens, it's too late. So spending less money upfront saves a lot of money later on. And also having a partnership with private sector not only provides that expertise that may be lacking within the organizations, it also the consultants bring different perspectives from working with different organizations and bring industry best practices to the table. And always our customers are always asking, hey, what are my peers doing in this industry or in that industry? So that's always helps them enhance and also compare themselves to where they stand with respect to their industry peers. And the main goal should be how can I run faster than the next guy? So having more defense in depth, more controls in place, and identifying gaps, addressing them. So all these are the steps that should be taken to get there.
This is why you asked me how fast I can run last time we were there. Okay. Makes sense. Okay, get it.
As a city, I think we're in government. We're always going to rely on outside partnerships. Obviously there are things we are doing within the city to protect, especially when it comes to education of our employees. But when it comes to innovation, I mean, those are things that quite honestly, that we are not developing in the city. That's not our, level. ITA is not there to then think about what's that next thing and how can we do that? We have to rely on those partnerships. Innovation happens much faster outside. And so those type of partnerships, I think, will be there for any city or any type of government.
Yeah, that's true.
Absolutely. And so, actually, what I'd like to ask just further about that, Councilmember Lee, because I'm sure there's some people on the call here, and then some people that will watch this retrospectively that have interesting technologies and great solutions to help out something as large as the Los Angeles city, right? So, how would you say what's the best practice for someone from the private sector to approach you guys with an interesting technology that, if they're interested in developing a partnership with you all?
Well, I think that as part of the city council, it's our job to, and I think majority of the city council is worried about this, knows the importance of this. And so I think we're always taking meetings with cybersecurity companies to try to learn what, really, like I said, I don't think I've had a meeting with a cybersecurity company where I didn't learn something new, or I didn't, a new threat out there, a new way to keep against that threat. So it's incumbent upon elected leaders to just make sure that we are relying on those experts and meeting with them to know, again, to try to find out what we don't know in this area. We're not cybersecurity experts. We rely on the experts to give us those strategies, and it's our job to make sure that when we're meeting these companies, if something makes sense, if something is new and innovative, that we're trying to make sure that our ITA department is moving forward with something that deals with that issue.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for sharing light on that. I think that'll be really useful for people on the call, and of course individuals that are watching retrospectively that are interested in formulating that partnership. I do believe that takes us down through our last question. We probably have enough time for about one or two more questions. If anyone on the call has one, feel free to drop it in the Q&A. And while we're waiting for those, if there are any left, I'm just going to open the floor and go down the panel list here, just for any closing remarks, things you want to leave people with, whether it's just an anecdote about strategies that have worked, just anything relevant to the call. I just wanted to give an opportunity for each of the panelists to close it out with a summary. So I will let's go with Dr. Akshay first.
Well, I mean, I'd rather talk about the two of them here because, so Councilmember John Lee is somebody who's actively engaged in topics like this. I've known him before, right? So we see him in most discussions. He wants to know what is going, but that level of engagement, how common is that through elected officials coast to coast? That's the first question, right? So these are proactive individuals, but how do we get all the peer group within that organization to embrace that idea? Shobha comes from a background of technology even before Anvaya, and Anvaya has clients from military to public utilities. It's a large spectrum background, but that is not all cybersecurity providers are not that way, right? So how do you these are probably outliers when it comes to the general group of folks, but that is the risk in society, right? So how do you create this value across the board? And that's what, at least from the academic perspective, that I'm trying to do, right? Invite John Lee over, bring Shobha as an expert, get folks like this out there and says, look, this is the expertise and this is what they have learned. Share with us your challenges and work together. And so this is the fabric in our society that we're trying to do. And I think, I'm very happy that this platform is here. Such platforms, and even the video that will be shared, I'm sure I'll be sharing with my students. Things like this is what creates that body of knowledge. And for tomorrow's knowledge workers, they need references such as this, right? So this is that point where we say, okay, this is that moment where they got together and they had this discussion. And the big question is, where do we go from here to the next one? There has to be a positive growth. There has to be collaboration, right? It's not like you get back and you discuss the same thing over and over and sound like a broken record. So that's what I encourage everybody to do is to, yes, we have it. We have identified some things. So be champions within the peer group. It says, hey, if you don't know about it, wake up. That email that's promising you that fortune might not be real, right? And thanks for the gift card, but I didn't ask you for one.
Yeah, maybe I was giving too much credit when I said a majority of elected officials are worried about this. We all have budgets, and we all have we have to balance those budgets, and good ideas are thrown at us every single day, but it's really incumbent upon the people who are aware of that this is an ever-growing threat, constantly, to just make sure that we are vigilant in making sure. It's very easy because we have so many issues we're dealing with right now, right? We need more police officers. We need new facilities. We need all these different things. And sometimes cybersecurity is then sort of, everyone here has said it. It's reactive. It's like, oh, well, we thought we set up, good, that something that was good enough to keep us out. It used to be that, perimeter defense was the primary sort of strategy. And in my mind, I feel like that whole perimeter, as we thought about it in the past, is sort of gone. We're working in the cloud. We have people working in hybrid work situations. The perimeter is everywhere now. And so I think it's incumbent upon me to make sure that my colleagues understand that this is a real threat, and this could cost us so much more down the line, right? Pennies spent today, save us dollars tomorrow. That's something that it's not easy to do. I'll be quite honest with you. It's because it's not immediate. It's not something that you can put on a campaign mailer. Like, I think we stopped the threat because we enacted this legislation. And so it's really incumbent upon the people who understand that this is looming out there to share that the best way they can, to make sure that their colleagues who are part of that voting body understand the threat as well.
Yeah, if I may add one thing to people, process, and technology, we've seen in many instances where tools are purchased, but not necessarily used, and some are not even utilized 10% of the time. There may be overlapping of tools. So all these, though the money is spent, they're not really serving the purpose that they're designed to serve. And having that understanding of how the tools should be utilized properly to the maximum extent possible, that would also help mitigate some of the risks.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We have time for one more. We actually got another question from an attendee, so thank you so much to who submitted that. So they want to dive deeper into, just really quickly, about the concept of proactive threat mitigation. They would like to talk more about examples, but not just training of existing workforce. So what are some examples, and anyone feel free to contribute to this if you have the ability to answer, but specifically about this concept of proactive threat mitigation. What are some things that we can do, whether you're a public or private partner, and not just workforce training?
I'll take one example, maybe a couple. So one is open source intelligence. So there is a lot of information out there. So if anytime we go into an organization, we see what's out there on the internet before we even step foot into the organization's infrastructure. So understanding that and identifying the threats and how those threats actually affect the organization, the impact that the organization is going to have by doing the threat modeling. So that's an important step. step before performing a risk assessment. So that's where we go in with a better knowledge of the organization. So that's part of proactive threat mitigation. And I want to take an example of, say, Wi-Fi, right? So are there shadow devices within the organization that are connected to the Wi-Fi? Do people have their own routers, for example, or access points? And so we actually literally walk around the buildings or in the office to identify those and any vulnerabilities in the wireless network. So that's also a proactive threat mitigation. So
Thank you for that. Any other thoughts on that at all? I just want to make sure everyone has it.
I mean, I've spent over the last decade serving as a chairman of a conference on this particular topic called Left of Boom, right? It's a conference on proactive. Boom is a trigger, and left is a timeline before the boom for proactively preventing the boom, right? So I brought together everywhere from diplomats to heads of states that are working from military admirals. I mean, you name it, they've been there. CEOs of billion-dollar companies. This is the 11th year we're doing this in June. Anvaya actually is one of the companies that participate in this every year. So being in that space, my job is to bring these folks together and discuss the theory behind it. And hopefully they go and work together to build a solution. So this is how I tackle this field of proactive threat mitigation. And ultimately, everything we do is proactive threat mitigation, right? So even back to the question, how do you justify? Well, the entire insurance business is based on that. Why do we buy an insurance to drive a car? How do we justify it? After a year, you spend X amount of dollars. You say, well, if you had an accident, you would have spent this. That's it, right? Ultimately, you lost that money. If you had zero accident, you haven't, you lost money. So there are many things in life we accept. We haven't accepted this because it hasn't been there long enough. That's the reality, right? So when I say study behavior, I also study consumer behavior. Human dynamics is a very interesting thing. So as you go through this thing, eventually, but then it's a generational issue, right? Eventually, so the good thing about it is humans are we are a finite object, right? So and that's why it's when you're sitting, no matter how great you are, whatever policy you build, there's a replacement for you coming sooner or later. So when that happens, that they would go, well, it totally makes sense. I can't believe they didn't have that. Well, what do you mean people didn't have insurance back 400 years ago? Well, that's when they didn't. So it's all based on that. So cybersecurity compliance, cybersecurity insurance, ransomware security, all this thing will be integrated into, especially with autonomous car. Imagine driving with a car where it says, well, your child is driving in a car and the car's brake system has been taken off, pay Bitcoins to get it back. Are you going to do it or not? It's as simple as that. I mean, so if it's your mother, elderly parents that are doing this, or your children, you get to choose. Do you lose them, or do you gamble saying they're guessing it? That's the question. And that's the boom I'm referring to.
Yeah, and quickly I want to add, so hacking is proactive threat mitigation penetration testing. So the hackers have all the time in the world and unlimited time, but we have to do this in a very limited time and limited resources. So but we still get a lot done. And in identifying the vulnerabilities and being able to exploit to show that they're in fact something that can be exploited. So those those assessments and penetration testing really add value. I can't emphasize enough. That would be a very important step in first of all identifying and then taking the action to mitigate those risks.
Cybersights is going to be an ongoing webinar series, so I'm super excited to have that as a continuation. I'm looking forward to welcoming you all back. To the attendees on the call, I can't thank you enough either. Thank you so much for the participation, the Q&A as well. You helped drive that conversation forward to get more information during this hour. But guys, seriously, thank you so much. This has been such a blast. I can't wait to stay in touch. and hopefully you enjoyed your time.